Hey guys, welcome back to Caffeine Crime and to Spooky Season 4. Today is episode 2 and it is all about the Lizzie Borden house. If you're new to the channel and just stopping in, hi, I'm Allie. I am the host of Caffeine Crime. Every year for spooky season, we take a pause from true crime and we jump into haunted paranormal places. This year, though, every Tuesday, you can check out a new episode from season 6, spooky season, on the podcast. Caffeine Crime is available on Apple, Google, Spotify, Anchor, and many, many more podcast platforms. And then every Friday here on YouTube for a throwback to spooky season from last year, season 4. They're now officially going to all be on YouTube. And hopefully next year, season 6, the current season will be on YouTube too, let's hope. But if you're also here for that true crime fix, you can stay tuned for season 2 serial killer season that is still being uploaded every single Tuesday as well. So you get 2 episodes here a week and 1 on the podcast a week. And if you tune in here for spooky season, you get to see me rocking different Halloween looks that I've created on my beauty platforms. And if you're interested in that, I will have the link down below. Let's get into today's episode, the Lizzie Borden house. We're going to go down the history lane and talk about the history of the location of Lizzie, her family, and what makes the Lizzie Borden house so paranormal, and who do you think committed the murders?
All right, so I'm sure you guys know the song, Lizzie Borden Took an Axe. She gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. So growing up, I would hear the name Lizzie Borden. I was kind of surprisingly shielded from a lot of horror things and true crime and stuff like that when I was little. Definitely something that I fell into when I was much older because my mom didn't like a lot of things like that in the house. So I didn't really grow up with the story of Lizzie Borden, but I had heard this song, and I don't know where, but yeah, so I've always known the name, and quite a few years ago, I don't even know what year it was, when I finally stumbled across Lizzie Borden's story and read it, and it is intense and insane, and definitely going to be a good one today. So, Lizzie Borden, this is a story... probably the oldest one I've done. This is from the it starts around the 1860s because she was born in 1860. So yeah, we're going back quite a few ways, back before a lot of things. And Lizzie Andrew Borden was born on July 19th, 1860 in Fall River, Massachusetts. Her parents, Sarah Morse Borden, Morse was her maiden name, and her father, Andrew Borden. His family was one of the founding fathers of Fall River, Massachusetts, and his family was actually one of the founding families of Fall River, Massachusetts. And unlike some of the other founding families, they struggled a lot. It wasn't easy for them. They didn't have a lot of riches, so it made Andrew work really hard for what he did have in the future, but it kept him in the same mindset of he didn't feel like he needed to have all the riches in the world. Even though he had the fortune, he didn't have to be flashy with it. Him and Sarah were a young love, and they were married for actually about 5 years before they had their first child. They had Emma and Lizzie. So there is a big age gap between the girls, I believe almost 10 years. And because of this, Emma really remembered her mother, Sarah. She was very close to her mother. Her mother taught her how to cook, how to take care of the house, how to take care of Lizzie, and she was very close to her mom. So she, of course, took it very hard at the age of 12 when her mother passed away. I forgot to put in my notes of what she passed away from. From what I remember from researching it, it's actually something that's pretty common. And nowadays, people, or maybe it's not as common, but nowadays it's something that people can live with. And we have the technology and the resources to be able to take care of it. Where back in this time, we unfortunately didn't. So she did pass when Emma was 12 and Lizzie was only 2 years old. So she didn't remember her mother a whole lot. But as her mother was dying, she told Emma to look after her sister and to promise to always be there for Lizzie. Like mentioned before, Andrew was known as a very wealthy man. He had a casket business where he had caskets, but he's also invested into a lot of other places. He had a lot of rentals, worked with a lot of realty things, and a lot of properties. So he was very wealthy, but he was, like I mentioned, a penny pincher. He did not like to spend a whole lot of money. Um, and it's reported that his worth was over $300,000 at the time of his death, which is like millions nowadays. Like, it's insane. He remarried 3 years after the death of Sarah to Abby Gray. And the girls were pretty sus of Abby from the beginning, thinking that she married their dad for the money. But they just kind of kept to themselves. And you have to think, Lizzie was only like 5, where Emma was like 17. So she's much older. So I think it was more of like Emma being like, "You're not my mother. I'm very suspicious of you because I think you're marrying my dad for his money," and that type of ordeal. So what people assume is that Emma put it into Lizzie's head a lot to not like her, and that she is Abby or the stepmother, but we don't call her mom. She's not our mom. And apparently that was really drilled into Lizzie's head from the young age of 5. Girls actually kept to themselves a lot, and they never called Abby mom. They called her Mrs. Borden or Abby. Besides when Emma went off to school, which we'll get to in a minute. But Lizzie and Abby actually didn't get along very well. If Lizzie wasn't keeping to herself, she loved to go out in the barn. They had this big cage filled with pigeons. She loved animals. So she spent a lot of her time with them. We're not sure of what led to this, but in 1866, Emma was sent to a girls' school that was 25 miles away. And while some people like to say that there was like a mess going on at the house, like, she wasn't being very kind to Abby. Obviously, they don't like Abby, but for whatever reason, a lot of people think that he sent her to the school 25 miles away instead of a closer one because she was further away, so she could only come home and visit her little sister Lizzie on holidays. But what I assume to think is because the school is actually cheaper. So if you think about Andrew and being like the penny pincher he was, I'm kind of thinking maybe he just did it money wise because it did cost a pretty penny to send her to any school. So you would kind of figure he would send her to the cheaper one. But she actually discontinued her studies here after a year and a half when she came back, and she picked up the role as the mother for Lizzie instead of letting Abby do it. And there's speculation around this that around the time that she was at school for a year and a half, Lizzie started getting closer to Abby, started calling her mother and mom and stuff. And when Emma would come home for holidays, was very upset about what was going on. Or when she was writing letters back and forth with Lizzie, she could see that Lizzie was getting a lot closer and started even calling Abby mother in the letters. So Abby or Emma was kind of like, "No, I'm coming back home." So she did come back home. In 1872, they moved into the now Borden House. So beforehand, they lived in a different house that Andrew had actually gotten when his own father passed. It was like the family house. So now the Borden House, that is known to be the spooky place for the spooky season that I'm going to be talking about, they moved into in 1872. Still a really long time ago. But it was once a duplex home. There's actually 2 staircases in this house that lead to different points of upstairs. So originally, before the Bordens moved in, it was like a house where 2 families could share it. And they would share the main floor with the dining room, the living rooms, and like the kitchen. And then there'd be stairs. I think it was a staircase like in the main entryway, and then I think somebody said that there was a staircase like in the kitchen area, and they led up to different parts of the upstairs where you couldn't. Let me try to explain this. So, the staircase that led up from the kitchen, I believe there was Lizzie's room or the girls' room, because Lizzie's room, if you walk into it and then over to the side, there's a smaller bedroom. So, when Emma lived there, Lizzie actually had the smaller room, but then when Emma moved out, Lizzie had the bigger bedroom. But so there's that bedroom, and then there is the master bedroom, which was Andrew and Sarah's, of course. But if you take the other staircase and the entryway, you actually go up to the other bedrooms, and you can't get to, which is the guest bedroom. So you can't get from the guest bedroom to Lizzie's bedroom without going down those stairs, going to the kitchen, and going up those stairs to Lizzie's room. It's really weird, but just think of it as a duplex upstairs. So they can't get from room to room upstairs. You have to go down and take the other stairs. It's a little confusing. And then I believe from the side with the guest bedroom, there's another flight of stairs that go up, or a little ladder or something that goes up into the attic, where there's actually a couple more rooms, and one of which was the maids, who we're going to talk about in just a minute. So the layout of the house is kind of strange. There's also like two like living room areas. So there's like the room that you first kind of walk in by the entry, but then there's like another room in another part of the house that has like a couch and, kind of looks like a living area as well. And I mean, from the sound of it, it sounds like a really nice house, but there was no indoor plumbing. And most people at this point, especially like rich people who are wealthy, like their own father, had plumbing at this point. They did have running water as soon as that became available in that area. They had running water. But they actually still used kerosene light or lamps, and even when electricity became available, like they didn't have that. And they also still heated their house or their homes with wood fires until Andrew actually crafted the furnaces himself, like the radiator furnaces, and they're actually still the same ones that are in the home now, which is insane. But Lizzie definitely wanted to live a more rich lifestyle like her cousins and other people. She actually wanted to live at one of the more bougie houses in town and not where they currently were. But her father was always just like, no, we're good. We're not spending money to go and party and live like those people. Like, we are living a good life here. He was very content with his life and wanted it to stay that way. He also always tried to marry off his daughters, but neither one of them was ever worried about getting married. Lizzie was just kind of more of a loner, and we're going to touch base more on that in a minute. But I think for Emma, it was more of so like not wanting to leave her sister. She wanted to stay with Lizzie. So they were just in the home. And at this point, Lizzie's becoming a teenager, and that means Emma's in her 20s and still living with them as well too. And you got to think back in this time, like, it doesn't sound like a crazy thing now, of course not. In that time, like, women were like, you were supposed to get married and start the family, and that's just pretty much what men thought women were just for, and that was the only thing women were for. So it's been known that Andrew had like a little bit of maybe anger towards this, that his daughters weren't getting married, that they couldn't find a suitable man, or whatever the case may be. But they were well dressed. They were frequent shoppers at the dress shop in the town, and they were fed. They may have not had all the riches in the world, but they were taken care of. They even had a maid, Bridget Sullivan, who was actually an Irish immigrant, and was 25 years old. So at this time, Irish weren't even welcomed very much into America. They weren't, I guess they were just like more like frowned upon. So I'm assuming that's why she became like a live-in maid. The girls actually called her Maggie, and some people say it was like just a nickname they came up for her, but others have said that they actually had a maid prior to Bridget whose name was Maggie. So it was almost like they didn't want to learn a new name, which sounds so petty and ridiculous, but I will be calling her Bridget throughout this to show her a little bit of respect. But Bridget said that although they never raised voices, the tension between the Borden home was so bad she tried to quit several times, but Abby, the stepmother, would beg her to stay every time. Going back to Lizzie, Lizzie taught Sunday school and she was very well known in the church. She had pretty, I mean, not great, but like okay grades at school. Um, she was known not really as like a threat or anything. I mean, there was some like little quirky things about her that we'll talk about, but for the most part, they were known as a well respected family and that kind of, again, kind of kept to themselves, but they were wealthy, so I'm sure that made them look more good in the people's eyes too, which sadly is still the case nowadays. One day, while both of the girls and Bridget were home, someone actually broke into the house and robbed them. The police were called to the house, but the girls hadn't seen anyone come in. But get this, the whole house was completely fine besides the master bedroom where Andrew and Abby stayed. There was actually still a penny nail in the door where someone had used to pick the lock, and $80 cash was stolen, $30 in gold was stolen, and Abby's gold watch and chain from her family was the only thing that had been taken. So pretty much just stuff from Abby and then some money from Andrew. The cops looked into it. They were really like, how did the three women in this house not realize that somebody broke in? And at the time, Bordens were like really strict about keeping doors shut and locked. Whenever somebody would leave the house, even if it was like just to walk out in their yard, they were constantly locking their doors, which is really weird, but they were very like uptight about it. So it was just very strange to the police that they hadn't noticed anything. And also strange when 2 weeks later, Andrew went to the police and told them to call off the search, that they weren't looking for anyone anymore. And from there, some speculated that they had thought it was Lizzie who had done it because she didn't like Abby. It was mainly stealing from Abby, but also Lizzie was kind of known as being a shoplifter. Even local shops, even though she was like as a child liked and she was in, taught Sunday school and all this kind of stuff, she was actually known to be a shoplifter, and local shops would see her shoplift all the time, and instead of saying anything, they would just bill her dad because they're just like, he has the money, we'll just bill it to him. So she was in trouble with her father a lot for shoplifting, and he was constantly having to pay the bills. So they definitely thought it could have been her, and it's kind of leading everyone, even myself included, to believe that Andrew thought it was her as well. He continued to lock his bedroom door every day and night, but he left the key on the mantle as a way to say, try again, I dare you. Lizzie and Andrew were actually pretty close, though, and maybe this is why he didn't, I guess, take it out on her too much. He actually shares his name. Her middle name is Andrew, and together they spent a lot of time together fishing, and a lot of people said she was actually the son he never had. And she even gifted him a gold ring, and he wore it every single day until the day of his death. In July of 1892, the family got into a huge fight, which caused the girls to go away to New Bedford, which is about 15 miles away, and it was just like a visit stay. They stayed there for a little while. When they did come home, Lizzie was still mad at the situation that she stayed in a boarding house for a few more days in town, avoiding her family. And when things settled, it is said that this argument and this kind of like falling out with her dad and Abby was when they found out that he was giving Abby's family property that he owned and not giving them any. And then things escalated and got really heated when they found out that he gave another house away to Abby's sister. But Abby's sister and her husband were actually like, I guess like the landlord had maybe died or something, and then the kids who became the owner of this house was selling it, so they were going to be homeless and they didn't have the money and all of this. So Abby went to her husband Andrew, and Andrew put a house into Abby's name so that her sister and her sister's husband could stay and live in that house. But this infuriated the girls, thinking that this should have been theirs. At this point, the girls started, when they came back home, they demanded their own houses, to which, to settle things and to calm things down, he did sell them a house together for $1, which they soon would turn around and sell back to him for $5,000, which is so petty. But it was their house growing up, actually, before they moved into the Borden house. But since they were women, they weren't supposed to live without having a man, so they sold it back to their dad. But before so, they did rent it out for a while and just split the money of the rent. Public, the girls would let it be known that they did not like Abby. A dressmaker told Lizzie that her mother's dress was ready, to which she spat at her. "Don't say that to me. She's a mean, good-for-nothing thing." She went on to tell her that her and Emma stay in their rooms. They don't even eat meals with them anymore unless they have to. And one night her father went out with a hatchet and killed every single one of her pigeons because he said kids close by were sneaking in on the property, messing with the pigeons, but messing with like their stuff. And I guess they were throwing stones at the pigeons, which accidentally broke some windows in the barn. He was pissed. So he actually went out and like beheaded each pigeon and then brought them in for Bridget the maid to defeather before putting them in the stew. So, like I mentioned earlier, these were Lizzie's pets, so she obviously was like very distraught about this, and it's just so sad and awful. Soon after this time, the whole family comes down with this sickness. There's no plumbing in this house. They're all sick, all of them, including the maid. Andrew thought it was spoiled food Bridget had made them, but they had only had that the morning of their deaths. Spoiler. But someone said it was actually swordfish that was left out for too long. Bridget had cooked it and it made them sick. But Abby thought someone was poisoning them. She even went to the doctor, which was also like their close friend. He actually lived right across the street from them. And she told him, "I think someone's poisoning us." And he was like, "No, nobody's poisoning you guys. You guys just have, food poisoning, probably from the swordfish that was left out. Don't worry about it." She was very freaked out, and she thought that something was happening, though, and that somebody was trying to kill them. And on August 3rd, 1892, they're still kind of sick. It's kind of like the aftermath of it, but they're still like getting over it. John Morse, which was actually Sarah Morse's brother. So this is the girls, Emma and Lizzie's uncle on their mom's side. He came to visit, and apparently he liked to come in and see the girls because they're his nieces, but he also did business with their father still and got along with their father, reportedly. So he came in to spend some time. He wanted to talk business with Andrew, so he stayed in the guest room. Well, that day, Lizzie wasn't home. She had actually been away for a while on like a trip, and she had gotten back home, but she was with her friend Alice, which we will talk about some more too. And she started talking to her friend Alice about how she thought Bridget might have been poisoning them. And this girl's like, "Bridget, really? I don't think so." And she's like, "Yeah, she's the only one that's not sick. But it's been reported that Bridget was sick too." So then Lizzie started blaming it on the bread. And her friend Alice is like, "That's the bread from the bread market here in town. Everybody eats that. Nobody's been getting sick but you guys." And then she was like, "Well, maybe somebody's poisoning our milk." And she said, "I think somebody's poisoning our milk. There's a lot of people that are out to get my father." And Andrew was known to not be a very nice landlord. It was the type of ordeal where if somebody was like really hurting for money, he was pretty much just like, "Okay, then you need to get your stuff and get out. Like, this is your last month. If you can't pay rent, you're not staying another month." So Lizzie was like telling Alice, "I'm really worried. I think something as bad is about to happen." And that her father wasn't liked by so many people, so someone was poisoning them. And she was afraid to sleep at night because she thought somebody was going to burn the house down around them. Well, the next morning, Bridget, John, Andrew, and Abby all have breakfast in the morning around 7 o'clock. They visit for a while, and then John gets ready and he leaves around 8:45 to go to the store and the post office or wherever. And he also has another niece in town that he said he was going to visit, but he said, I'll be back for lunch. So he leaves, and then about 9 o'clock, Andrew goes for his morning walk, and I think he had a place to go to, so he leaves and goes to that. And so who's left at home? So Emma, let me just say, is away on a trip. She's still gone. So the only people home at this time is Bridget the maid, Lizzie, and Abby. Abby asked Bridget to clean up all the windows, and Bridget remembered this vividly because of how ill she still felt from the swordfish. So she has to go out and get a bucket of water and the cleaning supplies to clean the windows, and Mrs. Borden, Abby, is in the house tidying up. Lizzie finds Bridget outside and she asks her, Oh, are you going to clean the windows? And she said, Yeah, Abby wants me, or Mrs. Borden wants me to clean the windows. And she said, Oh, okay. She sees her for a few minutes and then Lizzie enters the house. And from what Bridget has said, and her story has never changed, she never seen anybody else enter the home. None of the doors opened. Like I said, they all like to keep the doors locked. It was actually known, like, even when John left at 8:45, Andrew had actually walked him to the door and locked the door behind him. Like, they were that cautious about their doors. So while Bridget's outside cleaning these windows, Lizzie had actually told her, like, I can lock the door and you can just knock if you need to come in, or, whatever the case may be. Bridget's outside cleaning the windows. She said that she never saw anybody inside the windows, and she's just going around, the first floor windows, cleaning the outsides of them. Once Bridget is done with that, she goes back inside, and this, she says, one of the next things she remembers is Andrew arriving home at 10:30 when the door was locked and his key got jammed, so Bridget has to help him open the door. She said during which she let out a curse word, and she said she heard Lizzie laughing from upstairs, which will come into play. Andrew comes in, and Lizzie walks into the room and talks to him for a little bit as he takes his boots off and gets comfortable on the couch for a nap, at which time Lizzie goes back to the kitchen and tells Bridget the store's having a sale and that she should go check it out. Well, she first says, Are you going to go out today? And Bridget's like, No, I think I'm just going to stay home because I'm still not feeling very well. She said, Well, I heard that there's a sale going on and you should really go check out this fabric. And Bridget says, Yeah, thanks, but I think I'm going to go upstairs and lay down because I'm still not feeling well. So she goes all the way upstairs to the attic. Now, I can't remember which side of the house the attic is on because it's really strange if it's on the same side as the guest room, where we know the first murder went down. Bridget goes up to the attic and she lays down to take a nap. And she says that usually in the attic, she can hear floorboards creaking. She can hear when the front door or the side door is opening or closing because of how old the house is. She said she never heard either sound of any of that going on. But the next thing she remembers is hearing Lizzie yelling and saying, Maggie, come quick. Father is dead. Someone came in and killed him. He had been hit with an axe or a hatchet 11 times in the head. His eyeball was split in half. His death is determined to have taken place around 11 a.m. Bridget comes downstairs and she is freaked out at the sight that she is seeing. And she tells Lizzie, Where were you? And Lizzie says, Well, I was in the kitchen reading a magazine. Lizzie says, We need to get the doctor. So Bridget runs across the street to where the doctor lives, but he's out on calls, so he's not home at the time. So then she comes running back, and about this time, their neighbor, Mrs. Churchill, sees Lizzie and Bridget kind of panicking. So she says, What's going on? And Lizzie says, You need to come over quick. Something happens to Father. So she comes over and sees what's happened, and she's like, Oh my gosh, we need to get help. I'll go call for the doctor. And then Lizzie tells Bridget she doesn't want to be home alone and to go get Alice, her friend, who she just told yesterday something bad was going to happen. So Bridget leaves to go get Alice. So Lizzie is left home alone, even though she said she didn't want to be alone. And if there's a killer somewhere in the house, it's a little strange. Finally, the police arrive and Alice is there, and all the doctor, the police, everyone said that this was the worst sight they had ever seen and that it was so awful it made them sick. This is where stories start to change a little bit, because when the police asked Lizzie, she told them that she was out in the barn with the pigeons, or where the pigeons, I guess, used to be, and that she was looking for tin or iron to fix the screen on her window, and at which point she wanted a snack, so she grabbed 3 pears from the pear tree and ate them out in the blistering hot heat in the barn. And from the barn, she said she heard some grunts and came inside and seen her father. Later, she said that she never heard anything. When questioned about Abby, Lizzie told police that she had received a letter earlier in the morning that a friend was sick and was asking for Abby to come see her, and that Abby left to go see the friend. But when they asked for the note or the letter, Lizzie had no idea where it was at. She then tells Bridget to go check upstairs. Apparently, all of a sudden, her memory comes back and she's like, oh, maybe I did hear Abby come home. So Bridget and the neighbor, Mrs. Churchill, goes halfway up the stairs, and kind of when you get halfway up to like the landing part or whatever, if you look straight ahead, you can look straight into the guest room. And when you do that, the bed is right there. So you can kind of see underneath the bed, because these are like the older wooden beds that are up higher. And right underneath, on the other side of the bed, they could see the body of Abby laying on the floor face down. And that was enough for them. Mrs. Churchill went back downstairs. I believe Bridget did go up and see that there was blood all around her. So she ran back down. Police said Lizzie had a bitter attitude the whole time that made them feel uneasy, and some said she was super calm and didn't show a lot of emotion, that she was very cold, even though her father was right there with his face like hacked. Police did look through the house, but they didn't do like a proper search this day. And unlike the movie, if you guys have seen it, I personally like the movie. I feel like it could have been better, but it's not completely accurate. They actually did not look on Lizzie for any blood, unlike the movie. But Lizzie did tell them that she had a bloody bowl of rags in the basement and that it was her time of the month, in case you were interested. So I don't think they really wanted to look into that either. They left the home early because they went upstairs and they asked to search Lizzie's room, because I think they were already suspicious by her body language and how she was acting. And the doctor was in there giving her morphine to calm her, even though the police said she was kind of already acting calm. And when they asked to search the room, the doctor said this isn't really a good time, even though literally 2 people had just died in this house. So they left, like they didn't even stay. In the basement, I guess besides the blood, they did discover 2 axes, 2 hatchets, and a hatchet with a broken handle. I don't know when they found which. I believe they took in the 2 axes and the 2 hatchets into evidence, and then later on during a search, they came back and found the hatchet with the broken handle, like somebody had broke the handle off of it. A friend of the girls, Alice, stayed with the girls, and when Lizzie was being asked, does your father like have any enemies or anybody out to get him, Lizzie said no. And that's when Alice spoke up and was like, Lizzie, you just told me yesterday that you were afraid something bad was going to happen. So again, making Lizzie look very sus once again. But Alice did stay with them. She stayed with the girls, Bridget and John. And cops were actually outside because they didn't want to leave the scene. So one cop was actually posted outside, and he kind of walked around the house doing like his like routine walk around. And during which he said that he's seen Lizzie and Alice go down into the basement in the basement window. He said he's seen them walk down there, and a couple minutes later, they went back upstairs. Not too long after that, he's seen Lizzie come back downstairs by herself. And when questioned the next day about it, Alice said, yeah, me and Lizzie went downstairs together. Lizzie wasn't down there by herself. Because the cop couldn't make out what Lizzie was even doing downstairs. And he said, yeah, I seen both of you. And then you guys went back upstairs and Lizzie came down later. And Alice said, oh, she must have went downstairs when I was in the bath. So Lizzie waited for her to get in the bath and then went back downstairs. Could she be messing with the broken hatchet then? It's kind of what the police were thinking. And then that same day, which was the next day, after the cop had questioned about that, John was actually leaving when crowds surrounded him outside the house. So cops had helped him back inside the house. And the police were still here asking Lizzie questions. And some of the questions were just like very strange to Lizzie, which made her ask if somebody in the house was a prime suspect, to which they finally said, "You are." After they had left, Alice had found Lizzie in the kitchen with Emma, and she was tearing up a dress that she claimed she had gotten paint on and was going to throw it in the fire, and she was pretty much tearing off pieces and throwing it into the fire, and Emma said, "You probably shouldn't be doing that." Alice even told her, like, "Look, that looks really suspicious. You probably shouldn't be burning a dress right now." And she said Lizzie didn't say anything. And when she was asked to actually give her clothes over from that day, she gave them a slip, a skirt, and a top. I'm not sure which ones they were, if they were actually the ones she wore that day, or if the ones she wore that day were actually the ones that she threw in the fire. On August 8th, it was a court day. Her nerves were so bad prior that the doctor had given her more morphine to calm down. So she was all over the place. Her story kept changing, and she even refused to answer some questions that probably could have gotten her off. So when asking where she was when the deaths took place, instead of saying the same things like in the kitchen reading a magazine, like she told Bridget in the first place, that she was out in the barn, like she told police in the first place. She says, "I was upstairs ironing, and then I was in the kitchen reading a magazine. Oh, no, wait, I was downstairs." Her story just kept changing. So on August 11th, she was arrested. There was enough to go ahead and put her in jail until she was indicted on December 2nd that year. But everything they held her on was circumstantial. They had like no like actual evidence or proof. So it was really hard for this trial that took place in New Bedford, which was 15 miles away, like I mentioned earlier, where the girls went and stayed. And the trial took place on June 5th, 1893. And by this time, they had found the broken hatchet. So they were a lot more suspicious at this point with having that too, as that maybe being the murder weapon. When the trial took place, another axe murderer was very close by, but the suspect for it wasn't near the area of Abby and Andrew's house or the Borden house during their murders, so that was ruled out pretty fast. Everyone's statements were literally all over the place. One cop would say this, and one cop would say this, and so the judge and the jury were just kind of like, their heads were spinning at this point. No one questioned the friend Alice about the dress, which was very strange. Lizzie said at trial that she was outside in the barn when it happened. She finally made her mind up and that was where she was at. And during the trial, they brought in the skulls of Abby and Andrew for evidence. So they actually had to boil down the skulls and bring them in to show. On August 4th, 1892, from 9 to 10:30, Abby was inside cleaning the guest bedroom where John Morse was staying. She was making the bed. Remember, she has Bridget outside cleaning the windows. Emma's away. John is apparently at the store or visiting a niece. And Andrew is on his morning walk or whatever the hell he was doing. And around this time, someone enters this room that Abby is not like either freaked out about or they snuck up on her. She is struck in the side of the head with an axe or a hatchet, which makes her fall forward face down. And then it's almost like she tried to go underneath the bed, and that's when she is struck 17 more times in the back of her head, killing her. Ugh, so awful. I have seen where it's stated that she was facing the killer when she was hit, so I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know how she would have been able to fall the other way unless it was like the force of it. But other people do say that maybe somebody just snuck, like behind her and did it. But thinking back to the giggle or the chuckle that Bridget had heard from Lizzie upstairs, It's a little strange. Why would she be upstairs around that time? It's also strange that after looking at the bodies, it was known that they took place 90 minutes apart. So that's an hour and a half from the time that Abby was killed to the time that Andrew was killed. So the 90 minutes after Abby is killed is the weird, awkward conversation between Lizzie and Bridget. Bridget goes upstairs to take a nap. We know that Abby is now dead. Lizzie's the only other person in the house, apparently. And she also finds her own father. So, back at the trial, they bring in the skulls of Abby and Andrew for evidence, where you can see how Andrew was struck in the face over and over again, and where Abby was struck first in the side and then in the back. Lizzie and Emma were both so sick. Lizzie actually fainted, which caused a huge thing, like to kind of show a little bit more innocence because of how she reacted from the skulls. But something that definitely makes her pretty suspicious now to us is the fact that Lizzie bought Prussic dissolving acid, or she had tried to, the day before the murders, but the judge had just like threw it out and said it wasn't related. And lo and behold, on June 20th, 1893, the jury found Lizzie not guilty because, for one, she was a woman, but for two, the jury was all men and they just couldn't see a little 5'4" woman doing this, even though the attacks were kind of like sneaking up behind somebody or doing it when somebody was asleep. So anybody could have done this. But they also said just seeing her, how she reacted with the skulls, and also they didn't have any hard evidence. It was all circumstantial. It was still a really weird thing that she just kind of like got off and, got not guilty because during the first court run with questioning and her being all over the place, like, I mean, she was arrested. I mean, they had enough to like pin it on her and arrest her. But by trial, Emma had come into a lot of money, and therefore the defense team for Lizzie was the best in this case. And that could have been a big reason why she got off. They were just really good at their job. And, the jury also just says that they just didn't see like any motive. But I do feel like there was a lot of motive if you really look into it, but how much of that was thrown out? A murder weapon was never like confirmed. People have always speculated it being the axe with the broken handle, and maybe that was what she was cleaning down like in the basement that night, but I don't think we'll ever know for sure what the murder weapon really was. Once leaving the courthouse, Lizzie told reporters she was happy and she was going to live her life. And her and Emma, they moved out of the house into a really nice home with maids and plumbing. And they had their father's fortune and they were living the good life. She changed her name to Lisbeth and got super close to the celebrity Nance O'Neill. So Lizzie and Emma were still living the life, but Emma wasn't really fond of it. I think Emma wanted the flashy things just as much as Lizzie did, and she wanted the parents out of her life too, but I feel like she was more innocent in this. I know that there's some people who think that maybe she had something to do with it too, and she was in on it, but she was out of town when it actually happened, and she was like called or telegrammed, whatever it was, to come home to see the incident. So I don't think that she had much to do with it because Emma and Lizzie actually had a falling out. Lizzie threw a huge party for her friend Nance, and during this party, an argument broke out between Lizzie and Emma. And some people, and in the movie and show, like how they've speculated that it was this evening where Lizzie finally told Emma that she was involved with this, and maybe that's what caused the falling out. Whatever it was something big because Emma never came back to see her sister. She never talked to her sister, nothing ever again. And they were super close. I mean, she promised her mom on her mom's deathbed that she would take care of Lizzie and never, leave her. So it's just crazy that it had to be something big to make her leave and never come back. Other people have thought maybe it was the fact that Lizzie never married, so maybe Lizzie was a lesbian. And back in that time, like that would be really frowned upon. So they speculate maybe it's that too. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation with this case, and that's why I keep saying it over and over again. But maybe she got upset because her Lizzie and Nance O'Neill was going to be together, or whatever the case may be. I don't really see that. I kind of see it more like as a sister's point of view. I would kind of see it more like her saying, yeah, I killed Abby and Dad. I wanted the fortune, and being like, oh shit, I gotta get out of here, and I'm never talking to her again. I feel like that's a lot more realistic than being like, I'm in love with Nance O'Neill. That's just my opinion on that, though. But whatever it was that made her leave, again, she never talked to Lizzie again, and Lizzie went on with her life, even though the people in the town, because she stayed in that town, they always thought of her as a killer, and then insert the names and all this kind of stuff. And then she was accused of shoplifting again in 1897, which didn't make her look any more innocent. It's crazy. June 1st, 1927, she died of pneumonia followed by complications with her kidneys. And her worth or net worth around that time was $250,000, which today would be like valued at like $5 million. Like, it's crazy. She left a large portion to the Falls Animal Rescue, and the rest she sent to friends and family. And crazy enough, 9 days later, Emma died from kidney complications in a nursing home. So they died 9 days apart. I think they were like, now that they think about it, may have got the ages a little off, because I want to say people said that Emma and her were 9 years apart and they died 9 days apart. Something like that. It's very strange. But a little bit more about the house. You can actually stay in the original Lizzie Borden house. I actually think it's called like Andrew Borden's house, but it's a bed and breakfast in Fall River, Massachusetts. And you can actually stay in the house. So most of the furniture, if not all of it, is like not the original furniture. After all of this went down and Lizzie moved out, the house was sold, and over time, other people moved in, remodeled it. I mean, had to tear out carpet, I'm sure, after like the scenes that were displayed there. People came and went in this house, but now they have it back to where it's like the same, or as close as they could get to the same carpet, wallpaper, furniture, everything. And when you walk in, it's like you went back in time. It's so cool. But there is plumbing. There is bathrooms and plumbing now. But when you go, it is still very eerie and strange. I have never went personally. I love Mikey Glamingore, and her and Spencer Henry, who he does the podcast Cult Leader, they went and stayed at it, and their video is really cool. I would check it out if you haven't already. They do kind of like a walkthrough. She actually has 2 videos on it. She has like a 360 video where you can see every angle of like the house, which is really cool. You can just have like a virtual walk through the house, but she also has the other video of their experience staying there. And they said the tour guide told them that all the furniture is just to represent the house and what it used to look like. The only original things is the house itself, and also the like furnace radiator things that I told you guys about earlier that were actually made by Andrew himself. They are still in the house today. You can stay in the rooms. There is the attic rooms. So I think there's like a couple attic rooms. One of them was Bridget's room. You can stay in one of those rooms. You can stay in the master bedroom, which was Andrew and Abby's room. You can stay in Lizzie's room. And then it has like the room to the side that was Emma's, or one of them was Emma's, one of them was Lizzie's. They kind of went back and forth. And then on the other side of the house, remember, you have the guest bedroom, which is the John Morse room where Abby's body was found. And then downstairs in one of the living areas, there is the room, and they actually have a couch set up in there and everything. I mean, they have like pictures of the crime scenes, everything, which I'm actually going to have on the blog today if you guys want to check it out. It's linked in the description of this. I'll have the pictures there, but just a warning, it's graphic. So They're old-timey photos, but they're still a little graphic. But this case is just so insane, and I have, like I said, wanted to do this for a really long time because this story has always been like just so crazy. And there's so many like speculations out there. Some people think that she was getting with Bridget, the maid, and that's kind of like how she came out of the closet. And Abby and Andrew found out about it and were going to disown her. So she killed them and the maid helped her. But I don't know. I kind of feel like Bridget was like so over this family that I don't really think it was that. Other people think that, like I said, Emma had something to do with it, but you guys kind of know my thoughts on that. Like she was away. I don't really even see that. But Mikey and Spencer, I think, brought up a really good point of thinking that John, the uncle, may have been in on it because if he got a money cut from it, kind of makes sense. And it's not like Andrew was his brother, Sarah was his sister. So that kind of makes more sense. And you guys can see their video. I don't want to give like too much away, but they have like a spirit box they bring in and talk to. You may not be into that type of ordeal, or you may not even, you might be a skeptic, but to me, it is very strange. They are asking questions about who killed them, and it says instead of saying like a name, it just kept saying like them and they is what they kept hearing. So they're just like, did they kill you? And like so clear, you can hear like an angry voice say it was John, which is so fucking creepy. So was it really John Morse? Did he do the killings? Because, it would be really hard for Lizzie to get out of her dress or to discard of a weapon and a dress. And, John could have made up an alibi and done the murders and then ran out of the house. I don't know. There's a lot going on. It's just so crazy. And some people think that it was Lizzie, John, and the maid together because she would have had to hear the doors opening and closing. Maybe she just like let it happen and got a little bit of the pay cut. I don't know. It's very strange. You guys tell me, what do you guys think? Also, like I said, there is the movie. I love Christina Ricci, and she's awesome. So she does such a good role as Lizzie Borden. It's actually turned into a show too. Honestly, the show was kind of more of like a snooze fest for me. I couldn't really stick with it. I may end up trying it again at some point. I had a lot going on at the time, so I just think I couldn't really stick with it. You kind of have to focus. It's one of those where you have to like kind of focus in a little bit. But the movie itself, I feel like kind of got a bad rep, but it wasn't bad. I feel like it was pretty decent. It definitely goes along the line that Lizzie did kill them. So it kind of plays along that role. But she's so creepy and she does such a good job at it. So if you haven't seen it, I feel like it is a really good watch. A little gory, but with a case like this, it's gonna be gory. And the movie does portray that she did have a relationship with Nance O'Neill, so that she was a lesbian, which she could have been. I mean, she never was getting married, and it definitely makes sense. So I kind of think that, but I don't think that was ever the reason for her to murder someone or her sister to leave. It just doesn't really add up to me. I think it was for money because people still kill nowadays over money, and I think her sister left because she found out she was involved. I really do. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know. Like I said, I'm going to have pictures of all these people and the house and all of that kind of stuff over on the blog today. And I'm going to be posting over on Instagram if you guys want to find me over there. Let me know what you guys think. I've just been so curious about doing this case, and it's just one that you can just debate forever because there's so many things. And I'm really sorry if I forgot anything. If I did, I will add it in today's blog post, but there's a lot of info and I wanted to get it on here for you guys. Would you guys stay in the Lizzie Borden home? I really want to go and stay. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Kind of just doing like an old-timey bed and breakfast, and it may kind of be eerie because of what went down there, but I don't know. You may be in for a frightening night at the same time. Thank you guys so much for listening. I'll be back next week with episode 3 of Spooky Season. I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. I know it's not like my normal stuff, but some of them, like this one, I feel like was pretty much like a normal episode. I got to just go over the history of Lizzie and then the house, and Just the fact that you can go and actually stay there, I think, is what's really cool and makes it such a spooky place for spooky season. Yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys next week.